Perhaps it was true what my father said, that I lacked discipline, the way any 9-year-old lacks discipline. I didn't always listen. I was skeptical. I doubted his gospel. I was curious. I touched the flame simply because it was burning, because discipline always seemed to me the pin that held the butterfly in the display case. Work maketh the man, he said to me. And day after day, I swung over those words and saw ahead of me a life withering slowly under all his multiplying decrees. Day after day, my heart bucked up against it. I was never going to be the perfect daughter. A grin of mischief opened ever so slightly inside of me, a seedling of a voice that said, no.
You just heard Safiya Sinclair reading from her memoir, How to Say Babylon. It's a compelling journey through her childhood in Jamaica as she was brought up in a Rastafari family. She then went on to forge her own literary path as an award-winning poet, author, and teacher of creative writing. That book has been translated into French and will be published here soon. Now, Safiya, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, the word in the title of that memoir, Babylon, in the
Yes.
Bible, it's a place, but in your household, it meant a lot more than that, right?
Yes. I mean, the word itself comes from the biblical example of, the Jewish people who were exiled to Babylon. And the Rastafari took this word to relate to their own struggles. Most people wouldn't know that Rastafari in Jamaica are historically a persecuted minority. I think most people, when they think of Jamaica, they think Rastafari is the thing that defines Jamaica. But Rastas historically have been, turned away from their homes, forbidden from having jobs, forbidden from walking along the beach sides that were being developed for tourists. They were kind of ostracized by the government and outcast. And this led them to become, very insular and to see everything that oppressed them as Babylon, everything connected to Western society, to colonialism, imperialism, racism, slavery. They call that Babylon. And so growing up for me, everything outside of our household and everything outside of the gate was Babylon.
And your father had a strong opposition to this. He had he was very invested in your moral architecture,
Yes.
as he put it. We tend to have this gentle, positive image of Rastafari, Bob Marley, preaching one love, a peaceful vegetarian movement. But you reveal another side to the movement where the experience is very different for girls and women, specifically. Tell us about that.
Yes, part of the reason I wanted to write this book and to tell my story is that, as you say, most people, when they think of Rastafari, I think they have in their idea the image of a man, and probably one particular man. I think most people, when think of Rastafari, they wouldn't think of a woman or a girl. And I wanted to really expand the view of what a young Rasta girl's life is like, what a young Rasta woman's life is like, what are her dreams, what are her desires, and to also talk about some of the things within the movement that I found quite restrictive as a young girl. There were a lot of rules placed on me and my sisters and my mother that weren't placed on my brother or the men of Rastafari. We had rules on how we could dress. We were not allowed to have opinions. We were not allowed to have friends. We had to, cover our arms, cover our knees. Some Rasta women had to cover their head. We could not wear pants. We could only wear long skirts and dresses. Restrictions on what we could eat. And so, as I think around 10, the passage I read was around the time I began to kind of question some of these rules. Like, what was it about my gender? What was it about being a girl in particular that made me be treated differently?
And that questioning continued into your adolescence, and you ended up breaking away. You had dreadlocks, like many Rastafari, and you symbolically cut them. Was that the turning point? Was that your exit?
I think it was the turning point. You know, I think of that moment as a defining moment in my life. And I think most people also don't realize that dreadlocks are a sacred marker of Rastafari. It's not a choice. So, you know, for a long time, having dreadlocks was not my choice. It was something that was decreed on me by my father. And then it began to feel that the dreadlocks represented a kind of loss of bodily autonomy at the crucial time where, you know, in adolescence where I'm trying to figure out who I am and what kind of woman I was going to be, the dreadlocks felt like this heavy burden that forever anchored me to my father. And so I was in the, you know, at this defining moment, I decided, well, I want to choose for myself who I'm going to be. And so I asked my mother, can we cut the dreadlocks? And for a long time, she always said, no, like your father would be so furious. And finally, she said, yes.
Now, your mother is a huge presence in this book. She sounds incredible. She navigated the belief system, parenthood, marriage, her own path. She introduced you to poetry, which you embraced and ran with.
Absolutely.
Do you think your mum is also a sort of poet, a writer in her soul?
I think so. You know, she often says, oh, I'm not a writer, I'm not a poet. But she was the one who gifted me this love of language. You know, she would have me and my siblings recite and memorize poems. She would talk to me about prosody, about the stuff of making poetry. And she was the one who handed me my first collection of poems in a time where I was feeling quite troubled as a young girl, feeling ostracized and outcast at school. And she said, you know, poetry had always made her world wide and wild and warmer. And she thought it would do the same for me. She told me that was alliteration. I said, what is alliteration? The damage was done, you know? And so this book in large part is a tribute to her and the gift that she handed to me. Like she truly changed the trajectory of my life by nurturing that poet sensibility and nurturing the writer that I would eventually become.
And the rest is history because among your many accolades, you recently won the OCM Booker's Prize for Caribbean Literature, which is a hugely important regional award. And that part of the world is in the spotlight here in France too, as La Première Festival kicks off in Marseille. This is a long weekend filled with events from music to visual arts to culinary traditions, which celebrate the cultural heritage of France's overseas territories. Now, French Guyanese dancer and choreographer Sisley Loubet is best known for her work with Rihanna, Beyoncé, Shakira. She's heavily involved in that festival. Sisley told us a bit more about the difficulty of getting art from those overseas territories better known internationally. Here's more from her.
The ultramarine territories, Martinique, Guadeloupe, French Guyana, Reunion Island, we don't have like these kind of forces to expand our culture as much. English-speaking Caribbean countries have the word English in it, and I think the language plays a part to be able to access and to reach and influence more people, because you have more people speaking and being able to relate to that language than like Creole or Zouk, which is a far more restricted population. So.
Safiya, a festival like La Première is designed to give more visibility to, for example, Caribbean culture and expressions of art. And when we talk about that, there's, of course, the long shadow of colonialism, slavery. It can't be discounted when we talk about how widely that culture is diffused. Now, recently, a top UN judge, Patrick Robinson, backed a new push for reparations for slavery to be paid to Jamaica at the rate of about $9.6 trillion. Other countries are also involved in these initiatives. What do you think about these measures? Do you think the solution will come financially?
Well, I don't know if the solution will come, but I think it should come. You know, I think it would be great if there was a moment of reckoning, right, where the global north and so-called first world countries kind of acknowledge that a lot of the wealth and privilege that they have now was actually built on the backs of the enslaved. And islands like Jamaica, right, where we're now living in the developing world. So I think we should have these, I think we should have reparations.
Okay, and of course that would have helped build the cultural infrastructure that so that arts and culture could be better diffused, broadcast around the world.
Absolutely. And to lift the nation out of just being someone else's idea of paradise.
Yeah, indeed. Well, finally, we asked you what was on your cultural radar at the moment. You didn't name a book nor a poem, but a film, Challenges, starring Zendaya. What did you love about this film?
They said I could name anything, something visual. Yes, I recently saw Challenges. I'm a huge tennis fan, so I immediately was like, well, yes. But I love seeing Zendaya in this role of like the femme fatale. It's a really sexy, sultry movie. I love the way that Luca Guadagnino has filmed the tennis scenes, and it's, quite exciting. I enjoyed it.
Okay, so a secret tennis fan there. I wouldn't have expected it.
Oh, yes, huge tennis fan.
Safiya, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
We'll leave you with a clip of that film, Challenges, and a reminder that How to Say Babylon is out in English and soon in French. There's more news coming up on France 24 just after this.
You don't know what tennis is. It's a relationship. We went somewhere really beautiful together.
Let's go! I'm taking such good care of my little white boys.
I assume you planned this?
Not this part.